Hi, this is Dr. Josh, and I can't believe it. I just interviewed my own brother. So this is a very personal interview, raw, definitely shared some things, not just about him, but myself. And I'm very proud of this episode. You'll want to go to the very end, watch the whole episode, because at the end, we definitely have an exciting, quick lightning round. And the ending is actually really inspirational. So thank you for watching this very personal episode. I still can't believe I got to interview my own brother. And I feel like this episode really unlocked something that had been frozen since my brother was 20 and I was 22, studying in England at the University of Cambridge. So again, a very personal episode with amazing results. Positive ones. With that, peace and plants. Daniel Helman, Ph.D., is a transdisciplinary researcher and educator whose work explores the frontiers of mind, brain, and society. Trained in the sciences and philosophy, his unique lens bridges neurobiology, systems theory, and cultural evolution. He's an advocate for rethinking so-called incurable conditions like schizophrenia, not just as pathologies to manage, but as dynamic states that may be reversible, interpretable, and even transformative under the right conditions. Drawing from neuroscience, integrative medicine, and global healing traditions, Daniel Helman, Ph.D., brings a radically hopeful perspective to one of psychiatry's greatest challenges. This is a very special episode because I get to interview my own brother, Daniel. Unbelievable. So is schizophrenia a brain disease, a metabolic disorder, or is it a misunderstood form of human experience? My brother, Daniel Helman, believes we've been asking the wrong questions, and tonight he's actually flipping the script. Welcome to my brother, Daniel.
Josh, thank you so much. What a real joy it is. I can't believe it. Really fun
either.
Okay, so let's just start. You set up a really good question there at the beginning, and I want to point people to the great work of the 20th century psychiatrist R.D. Laing, who's, if you're looking for an idea about schizophrenia and this idea that the effects of society are really reflected in the disease that we see as schizophrenia. R.D. Laing, his writings are just excellent. Really good place to start. Now, as you know, I came down with the disease age 20, typical presentation. And so
actually, I know that story, but obviously the audience doesn't. In fact, a lot of the audience here, they're focused not on schizophrenia, but another brain disorder called Alzheimer's or other types of dementia. But the reason I'm interviewing my brother is it turns out that there are many common root causes to both schizophrenia and Alzheimer's and other dementias. So as you were saying, when you were 20 years old, you got hit hard with what?
Well, I had a psychotic break, and the whole idea of a prodromal period and then the period with severe symptoms for a while. But you've introduced another idea. So we will get back to the notion of whether it's a medical illness or something else, and the role of dementia. I want to highlight something, though, that you've introduced, which is that every kind of dementia or brain disorder is unique. Each person presents differently. I guess what I will be sharing with you today is related to my experience. And in the process of recovery, I found out that I was born with one kidney and one adrenal rather than two. And so obviously that will have had some influence on my illness. And I think in general, it's really important to see yourself as forging a unique path. At least for me, recovery was really very much tied into my own conception of how I was going to get better. And most people don't get lucky enough to recover. For me, I've been almost 20 years without any psychiatric medication, finished graduate school, had been teaching for a long time, have worked as a professor, have a really interesting life. And so I consider myself very lucky. But again, it's really important to emphasize that whatever you're doing with dementia, please treat yourself with care, and your path is going to be unique. And then also, at least for me, I treated mental health in a way that was similar to how alcoholics treat alcoholism. In other words, some of the symptoms that I was experiencing, in order to say that, oh yeah, this person has this illness, they had to rule out other medical things. For example, certain types of cancer can cause psychosis, various medical conditions. And so they had to rule those out.
So Daniel, the good news is that there's a happy ending here, that you specifically were able to, I would say, reverse your schizophrenia using a raw vegan diet when the medications that were offered to you didn't work. And so first of all, that's one of the reasons why I want to tell your story here, is to give people hope. Just like there's hope with reversing dementia or Alzheimer's, there's also hope with other diseases like schizophrenia. So I guess if we can go back to when you were about 20 when this happened, I take it you probably had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, so let's travel back in time.
Okay.
You and I are both attending Cambridge University
in England.
And I had been doing things that weren't so good, drinking a lot, drugs and that kind of stuff.
But let's just be clear. I was there at the same time, and I wasn't doing drugs, but I was definitely drinking. And it wasn't just the two of us. It seemed to be part of the student experience in England at that time. And I would imagine it may not have changed even now, but it's not uncommon for college students to drink, right?
No, that's true. That's true. On the other hand, I was definitely excessive. And I think one of the first things that probably made an impact on me as far as changing lifestyle was travel to North Africa. It was Christmas term break, and I went down to Morocco to travel and see what I could see that would be interesting. And the cultural immersion, the change of language and setting really set me up for a change in how I saw things. And then my birthday comes around. This is 1989, so quite a while ago. And my birthday comes around, and I start feeling very odd. I feel like I have tunnel vision. I start just feeling like my visual fields changes a little bit. My thoughts get more focused on existential kinds of things. And I realized I was in trouble. And I think I was having delirium tremens, withdrawals from alcohol. And then it persisted. And I thought, well, I can either see this as some kind of illness, or I could see it as some kind of spiritual awakening. And I consciously chose. I said, look, the best way to move forward is to see this as some kind of spiritual awakening, and I better change my life, change what I'm doing, quit anything that affects my brain, including caffeine, chocolate, everything like that. I mean, I was still omnivorous, eating everything, as far as cooked foods and all that. But I thought, okay, let me give my brain chemistry a chance. Let me,
Right.
yeah. Sorry, go on.
Right. Were you in Morocco or England at the time?
No, I'd come back to England.
Okay.
And if you remember, we traveled together.
Oh, that's right. We did.
And we went, I think it was you who had a friend who had gotten one of these very cheap flights.
Yes.
Yeah. See, like, you had to know, we had to go to the airport to buy the ticket from, I think it was Air China, and they stopped.
No, yeah. It was CAAC. I remember the joke. It was like China Airway always cancel, and it was the only airline I've ever been on where you have to bargain for your ticket, and you go there, and whatever it was, 60 pounds cash. It's like, okay. Deal.
Yeah, it wasn't very much money. It was 60 pounds to get us from London to Interlaken.
Yeah, in Switzerland.
Interlaken, or Lucerne. Yeah. Lausanne. But anyhow, it was interesting. But at that point, I was already less organized in how I was behaving and having some issues. But I hadn't yet gotten any kind of diagnosis. I hadn't yet had any kind of interventions, anything like that. But I didn't finish out my program. My experience has gotten very odd, and so I left early. I went on a leave of absence from my program. It was
in England,
yeah, and I went back home to Los Angeles and tried to focus on like meditation and things like that, and then got a job doing landscaping for a while because I wasn't really doing much, and then had a very bad psychotic break, ended up in the hospital, and that started a very long journey with lots of antipsychotic medications. In total, I was hospitalized 10 times.
Wow.
For a total of 6 months. And it was a 15-year period. So say age 20 to about 36, 35. And what happened after about 10 of those years, I realized that my pattern, I was persistently going off of the medication, but also stopping eating and drinking altogether. I without thinking about it, I would just sort of stop eating, stop drinking, go off the medication, end up back in the hospital. And I realized this is my body talking to me saying, look, what you're doing isn't good. And so I thought, let me take charge of my own recovery. I know the kind of protocol that happens when I go in the hospital. It's like 2 days of a very high dosage of the antipsychotic medication. And then for the rest of 2 weeks, sort of high normal dose. And then off you go. And so I thought, I can do that myself. Let me slowly lower the dosage. And if people around me are making, behaviors that make it seem like they're going to put me back in the hospital, then I better be responsible to do the procedure myself. And I did, and I was successful. My protocol was to lower by about 5% every month or two, 5% weekly.
5% of the antipsychotic medication.
Yeah. So if I was on, say, 5 milligrams of Zyprexa, for example, each day. I would pick one day that week, and I would split the pill in half, and I would only take half a pill, say, on Thursday. And I kept very good records of this. And I would stay at that same weekly dosage for a month or two, make sure I was stable, and then pick another day and do that same very small lowering that day. And it took 5 years to titrate all the way down. In that time, I successfully headed off a couple of hospitalizations myself, and I was unsuccessful one time. I was hospitalized, but that hospitalization was half as long as normal.
Okay.
But ultimately, I was able to get off the psychiatric medication. But that was after I had already put into place very good lifestyle choices. I was working as a teacher. I got a credential to be an adult school teacher, and I was teaching a classroom. I had taken on very good social roles. I had gone into some 12-step meetings and was very active in 12-step, working the steps and taking commitments and that kind of thing. Physically, I'd done a lot of hiking and dance and choral music, and was very active in lots of things like that. And then diet. You mentioned diet. That's a funny story. I wake up one morning early, very early. I'm living up in a north suburb of Pasadena called Altadena, which recently had the fires. And it's early in the morning, and I wake up and I think, today's a good day for a hike. I've been meaning to hike up to the peak of Mount Wilson that's there. And I figured I had enough time. So I packed some sandwiches. I think it was peanut butter and persimmon sandwiches,
Yum.
and got some water, and I took off, and I made it to the summit and made it back. And it was a little past nightfall, say 8 PM. But I felt so good. So the next morning I'm thinking, what can I do to keep feeling really good like this? And the thought just came to me, I know, I'll be vegetarian. And, I had been living in a court, so 8 little houses altogether, and there were a few other families there that were vegetarian. So maybe it was a social influence that put that thought in mind. But I cooked for myself. I cooked wonderful vegetarian dishes. It took a long time for my taste buds to change, perhaps even a year before some of these wonderful soups that I was making ended up tasting really rich to me. So I want to recommend, don't give up if something doesn't taste so good. So long as it's healthy, your taste buds will catch up. So there I am. I'm living in Altadena. I'm working as an artist, which is sort of a job of last resort when you're not really well enough organized to do other things. But enjoying myself and doing very active, lowering my medication at the time. And the thought occurs to me, I look in my refrigerator and I see, you have packs of eggs, 12 eggs, and there were 6 eggs in a pack that had been in my refrigerator for at least 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah. I looked and I'm like, well, I'm not eating eggs. Maybe I'm becoming vegan. And I thought, well, let me try it. Now, this was, if you all remember, in 1999, there was a big protest up in Seattle against the World Trade Organization forming.
Right.
Ostensibly, the idea was that the WTO didn't include labor or environment exceptions, whereby if someone is putting up a barrier to trade to protect the environment or to protect labor, then there's no mechanism to protect that. So that's why I was up there protesting. And I saw a whole bunch of protesters, a group of maybe 10 people, with signs about going vegan and the very vocal. And I looked at them and I'm like, oh, that's so odd. I don't think I could ever do that. And then less than 6 months later, I'm back down in Los Angeles or maybe it's a little bit later, but it's less than a year. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, maybe I'll be vegan. And so I cut out cheese as well and was vegan for about 6 months before I decided, hey, why don't I switch to raw vegan? And I was not really that set on a path to health that was intentional. It was more intuitive. In other words, my switch from a general diet to a vegetarian diet occurred after I did this long hike. I'd been concerned about my health. I'd had these little fat deposits under my eyes that I knew were related to the cheeseburgers I was eating every day. I mean, I knew I wasn't being healthy, but I wasn't living my life with a very rigid structure. It was much more intuitive. And again, when I switched from vegetarian to vegan, it was sort of, I looked, I saw, and I said, well, maybe I'm already becoming vegan, so let me just go in all the way. And then with raw vegan as well, it just sort of made sense to try and be all that more committed to health. And it's been a really good journey. Raw vegan is I would think is more different from vegan than vegetarian is from regular standard American diet. Raw vegan is so different as far as food preparation, as far as understanding how your body's going to respond to different foods. But this whole process of having a cleaner diet, really useful for becoming more intuitive about the things you put into your body. I have a very good sense of whether or not something's going to be healthy for me or not, just with muscle testing. Just basically by holding something, I can tell, I can get an impression. I was trained to go up into the mountains and figure out wild foods and which ones are going to be good to try and which ones aren't going to be good to try. And there's a whole process involved where first you touch something and then you may break off something and put it in your mouth and spit it out, and then your impression of that. And then you may take it and chew and then spit out and your impression. And in all of that, you really have to trust your body. You have to have a sense that you trust your body's reactions, and you have to respect your body. And by living a very clean diet kind of life, your body speaks very gently to you, and you get to hear it. So again, let me talk about what I had mentioned at the beginning, which is that everyone's experience is going to be different.
Of course.
I'm just talking about my own experience. Everyone else, you have to trust yourself. Don't do things that don't make sense to you.
Right. So that raises so many questions in my mind. The first one is, how did you come upon raw veganism? Because, I found it too, maybe 10 years after you, independently. But I'm curious, in your journey, how did, you're exactly right. It's very different just being vegan to being raw vegan. Was there a role model, or did it just come to you, or what was the trigger?
Honestly, I don't think there really was much of a trigger. I think I just got the notion that going completely raw would be much healthier for me.
Great. So it was intuitive. Awesome. So you just described this dietary transition over a long time. How does that correlate with your schizophrenia symptoms? Because you shared with us how you were able to slowly wean down on the antipsychotic medications. And what you didn't share with us so far is one of the reasons you wanted to get off these medications is, I remember you had some awful side effects from these medications.
That's true. Often they'll make a person sluggish. I had some periods where my legs or arms would tremble. I'm carrying a little bit extra weight right now, but definitely with those medications, I had more extra weight. I wasn't as sharp as I might have been. And also, the way that I found out that I have only one kidney was that these medications are actually damaging. And I was required to take an ultrasound to see the health of my liver. And in the process of that, they noticed that I had only one kidney and one adrenal. But I think one of the big issues with the medication was it just didn't suit me for how I saw my recovery. I mean, I had these very traumatizing internal experiences when I was in England, and had hit upon this idea that I'd better take charge and create a life for myself that was going to be healthy and spiritual. And the psychiatric medication was kind of at odds with that. And I want to emphasize that, again, short-term symptoms, if you're in a situation where you're confident that you have modes of recovery that you can use to deal with short-term symptoms, then by all means do so. But certainly these are very dangerous sometimes, and it's important to be comfortable. If people say, hey, you got to be hospitalized, you go and get hospitalized and you take whatever psychiatric medication people are forcing on you. That's just part of how it goes. And those medicines do, in a way, help a person pass for normal in society and let a person get more social roles, and in so doing get more skills.
And having been on the other side as an emergency room physician for many years, if I saw someone like you having a psychotic break, I would definitely give antipsychotic medications for their own safety and safety around people around them. So neither of us are saying never take in an acute situation, but we are saying, and just to be clear, from my memory, it wasn't just one medication. You tried a bunch of different antipsychotic medications and had the same issue.
That's true. The last one I was on was Zyprexa. For a time, I was on Depakote, lithium, and carbamazepine. The first one I was on, I think, was Stelazine. I had Mellaril PRN. For positive symptoms and for anxiety, I hit upon taking high lipid foods. Instead of taking, say, a PRN Mellaril, I would eat like 3 avocados or half a pound of brie cheese at one sitting, and then within about 30 minutes, I would settle down. For negative symptoms, catatonia, depressive symptoms, I'd be supplementing with a few tablespoons of nutritional yeast for a couple days, and then my symptoms would ameliorate.
But which is fascinating, because we now know nutritional yeast is high in MSG, monosodium glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. So basically, you were using both pharmaceuticals and then foods that had similar effects. So that's fascinating from the pharmacology side.
Oh, absolutely. And it's real important to be around other people. If you're looking to make changes, to be around other people who've made similar changes, to sort of see what they've done, to get some ideas that you can try yourself, and so long as it makes sense to you, and see what the effects are. That kind of trial and error is really important. But no, I had rebound effects of psychosis. Anytime I was on less medication, there was always a a threat of rebounding, of having a full blown psychotic episode where I was highly disorganized, um, and had that aspect looking psychotic. And once I was completely off the psychiatric medication, I was no longer subject to that. The psychiatric medication itself is almost like a reservoir of the illness. And to really be free of it, if a person's able to wean themselves off completely, then they can basically be recovered. So,
Right. So, let's talk more about that, because from the timeline, and again, I know this was over many years, but at what point were you finally able to wean yourself off of the medications? What was your diet at that time?
oh, I was raw vegan at the time. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, it's fair to say that in your case, you were able to wean yourself off of the psychiatric medications by going raw vegan.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely. I don't even think that goes far enough. I think to do so safely, one has to have very good faith in one's body and oneself, and cleaning your diet up, very gently. Diet's one of those things that's very, very important to change with care. But getting to a very clean kind of diet, whatever that means to a person, so that any kind of change in what you're eating or in your environment, that you'll notice it because you're now very sensitive. And being raw vegan is a really big part of that. I feel like I'm very aware of the effects of foods on me. And I think raw vegan is one of several pieces that helped for recovery. I think another one is exercise, moving around enough, beauty, being in nature. And then there's this social role, taking on a social role where you're responsible to care for others, gives a person some skills inside for that are healthy, that are a reflection of that social role. And then finally, having a abstract study or focus on mathematics or science or music, something within a framework that will allow you personally to change, like a personality change, whether it's a religious idea or a scientific idea, but some kind of idea that you subscribe to that is a path to change. Obviously, religious ideas are well seated there, where you say, oh, if I do this kind of ritual, then I may get healing. But it doesn't need to be a religious idea. It just needs to be an idea that has enough force that will allow for an internal change. Because that's what you want. If you're recovering from dementia, you want to know that that transition will lead to a good place. So you have to subscribe in some way to some kind of ideology that allows for that. And so those are pretty good components. Certainly raw vegan, it has if you're raw vegan, you're subscribing to a non-aggression kind of lifestyle as well. In a way, you're not eating animals. You're minimizing that kind of aggressive focus on your ecology, and I think that has a benefit too. But again, this is personal. Depends on a person's focus and what makes sense to them. What works for me isn't going to necessarily work for anyone else. But the fact that I was able to recover may inspire someone to say, "Oh, let me look for something that's going to work for me." And again, the late onset dementias are not altogether so different from early onset dementias. They're a result of changes to the body chemistry, and they can be treated in a way that certainly isn't, you don't have a guaranteed path, but if you work, you'll learn enough that you may be able to adjust a path and find a recovery that maybe other people haven't found. Each one's unique.
That's beautiful. And on an earlier episode of my podcast, Alzheimer's Breakthrough, I interviewed Fully Raw Christina, and she shared with me how a raw vegan diet actually helped her reverse her diabetes when she was a teenager. So yeah, it's powerful, and it's just amazing. Some other, I know this is painful to talk about, but just to be clear how difficult this was for you, there's a time period where you were homeless, right?
I never would have used that term for myself.
Okay. Well, you were living in your car.
Well, let me set the stage, and
Okay.
you and your viewers can decide.
Okay.
So I had completely come off the medication. I had just had a final hospitalization where they put me in the hospital for like a day or two because I had just bought a big van that ran on compressed natural gas, and I had driven it up to Oxnard, and the filling station for compressed natural gas, the fitting that was in the van wasn't the same clamp that you needed to put on to fill it. And so I was there with a file trying to file down some metal on this fitting, and the police showed up, and they were kind of trying to figure out what to do with me. They thought maybe I was trying to do some terrorism or something. And so they put they talked to me enough to find out that I'd been treated for schizophrenia. And then they said, okay, we're going to put you in the hospital. So that was my last hospitalization. I was there for like a couple days, and then they gave me some medication, and then they said, okay, you can leave. So I left, and I had to tow the van back. Anyhow, I got the fittings changed, and that worked fine. But I was not in great shape emotionally. And so I took to living. So I'd stayed with my folks for a bit. I had applied for graduate school. A friend of mine had said, hey, if you don't know what you're doing, why not go back to school? So I applied to a master's program in geology, which was the same thing I'd been studying at Cornell University and Cambridge University. So as I was waiting for the master's program to start, I was living in a van up in the mountains, and I said, hey, this is kind of like practice for when I'm going to be a geologist. I'll be camping out. And I would drive down every so often and stock up on vegetables and fruits and stuff. And as a raw vegan, I didn't really need any kind of food preparation other than cutting board and knife and that kind of stuff. And then I'd spend a few days up in the mountains, had a very good time, and then drive back down and do the same. I'd go to some libraries and study so that I had some background on the mathematics and science I'd be doing that served me well. So I was up in the mountains for about a year, little less than a year that time. And then a second time, as I was getting a Ph.D., it was a program that allowed you to it was a hybrid program. So I was basically off-site. I thought, why should I pay for an apartment? So I was living in a car up in the mountains, camping out, and every morning I'd drive down, go to a gym, have a shower, or work out, have a shower. Then I'd go to coffee shops and do my academic work, and then late at night, I'd be driving back up to the mountains and camp out again. So, I mean, I never really thought of myself as homeless. I was just, doing what I was doing.
You had a plan.
Yeah, but I think that's not so different from people who are homeless or unhoused. People do have a plan. Certainly in Los Angeles, lots of people are living in their cars. When I was in the master's program, I knew three students who didn't have a place to stay. And one was living in a car, another was sleeping in a music practice room. And yeah, I mean, but the cost of living, sometimes the time price to make the money to pay for rent and all that. If you can get away with sleeping in a car for a while in Southern California where the temperature is fine and if it lets you do other things, but
it's a trade-off. I understand. So, but the good news is by going raw vegan, you were able to get off of the psychiatric medication and, avoid getting hospitalized. And it sounds like you've thrived since then. You've gotten your Ph.D. You've had several different projects, teaching, etc. So it sounds like you've got your brain back, you've got your control back, and you're now able to harness the creative energy in your brain to help other people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I went for a master's in geology and then a PhD in sustainability education. And then my first job after that was teaching at a university in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. And then after that, I trained teachers up in a small island in the Pacific called Yap in the Federated States of Micronesia. And then the last place I was teaching was up in South Carolina at a place called Wofford College, teaching environmental studies. And I've written, I put together a book that hopefully will get an agent for. I had a couple other books that I published, and I've had a pretty good life. Things are good. I have a goddaughter or daughter by choice. A friend adopted, and I went along to help. A lot of friends, a lot of experiences all over the world. Traveled to something like 25 different countries and went to lots of conferences and doing good things. But, everyone's journey is unique. I will say that part of my focus on raw vegan is precisely to be able to tell myself whether something's healthy for me or not. Like I can take some food and I'll know pretty quickly whether or not something's going to agree with me. And let me talk a little bit about that process. I guess it's like muscle testing, where if you want to change your diet, you may take one thing and cut out that thing for like, I don't know, 3 weeks, say 3 weeks without wheat gluten. And then at the end of 3 weeks, you add back a whole bunch of it. And then after that, you see whether or not your body reacts well with that. And if your body has a negative reaction, then you're like, oh, maybe I should not be doing that wheat gluten anymore. Or if your body has no negative reaction, then you're like, oh, that wasn't a problem. And that's really important to be able to know personally what your body's doing. For me, so as you know, our sister came down with celiac. And in solidarity with her, I thought, let me cut out all wheat. And so my hypothetical wasn't so hypothetical. I had cut out wheat for a long time. I was driving in Los Angeles. There was I guess it's like restaurant supply store, and I parked. I thought this will be interesting. Let me see what kind of supplies are in there. And they had a whole bag of this wheat gluten seitan, this kind of stuff. And I thought, oh, why don't I get that? That'll be great. I had forgotten that I was off of wheat. I'm driving back home, and I pull open the bag because I'm hungry, and I'm eating while I'm driving. And my thoughts start to get really weird, like really strange thoughts. And I do a double take. I'm like, huh? That's really funny. And
Here's the interesting thing. We know that gluten gets metabolized into the brain as an opiate, like a morphine. So all of a sudden, you're having this huge dose, essentially of a narcotic, and then what happened to you?
Well, as a good scientist that I am, I stopped, and then the next day I tried again. I took a whole bunch of that wheat gluten and tried to see if I had the same reaction, and I did. And then I thought, well, okay, that sort of demonstrates well enough for me that I ought to avoid wheat gluten. And it's funny, some major part of my psychosis may have been tied in with my diet. It may have been pretty significantly a process where the gluten would change my brain chemistry to a certain degree, and that made me more susceptible to other things.
If we can go back there, because I found that really interesting. And from what I remember, the diet at University of Cambridge in England, every meal had to have 3 components. Number 1, something fried, a starch, and something sweet. Literally every meal would have all 3 components, and it's very possible that it could have been the gluten or something else like that. What about some of the theories of causes? And I've seen this in some of my patients, specific infections, whether it's Bartonella or toxoplasmosis, which is a parasite. I've definitely seen both of those as triggers of schizophrenia and other brain disorders. But I bet you were never tested for that. Even though what I was taught at Harvard Med School in my neurology rotation decades ago is you are not allowed to diagnose someone with a psychiatric diagnosis unless and until you've ruled everything out, that their thyroid's okay, that they don't have an infection, etc. And I understand you had dozens of hospitalizations, but any thoughts about other triggers back when you were 20 years old for this whole schizophrenia?
Oh, well, I wasn't living a healthy lifestyle. I mean,
Right.
I was excessive drinking and drugging.
Yeah.
And obviously those can be triggers. Diet
Right.
as well. I know for my time after university, when I was working as an artist, I had a wonderful cat, but I'm pretty sure that the toxoplasmosis worsened my symptoms. I'm pretty sure that I had an infection of that, and I'm pretty sure as well that I don't want to live with a cat again because of the risk.
Right, but because many cats will have toxoplasmosis in the kitty litter, etc. And yeah, it's definitely a risk.
As sad as that is, but that's how that goes. I mean, Cindy was a wonderful cat. She lived to be 18 years old. She was the best. I'd have parties, and she would go and sit on everyone's lap at some point or greet people at some point during the party. Wonderful cat, but some people are sensitive, and I'm sensitive also to electromagnetic fields in some degree. I don't have a cell phone because I can feel the fields if I'm holding it. If I'm walking under a power line and I don't know that there's a power line there, I will have a sense and I'll go, oh, what's that? And then I realize there's a power line there. And so that's a feature of my experience as well. I think some people also have pretty major chemical sensitivities, and it takes a while for the body to settle down. You know, our modern lifestyle in the developed world has a lot of things that are different from how we evolved. And a raw vegan diet is really close to the kind of eating that the human family evolved in. Um, Lacking, I mean, of course, it's a bit artificial in that we're not eating raw shellfish and insects and things like that. But it's a little safer not eating raw shellfish and insects. So,
especially these days when the seafood has high levels of heavy metals like mercury and cadmium and plastics and pesticides, PCBs, etc. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
So
I definitely feel it. You know, the time I spent in Micronesia was just a much cleaner environment.
right.
Uh,
But let's actually talk about one of the downsides you kind of implied that you gained. So let's just be clear. During COVID, you were actually in some ways trapped on this island in the Pacific because if you left, they were not letting you back because of quarantine issues, right?
Absolutely. Where I was, the borders were closed. If I had left, I wouldn't have been able to come back. And the reason for that is that there were no cases at all of COVID in Micronesia until the very end, like 2023. I think we got our first case. And so because of that, uh, you know, I was on this small island in the Pacific, 40 square miles, 100 square kilometers, 6,000 people, with a diet that was a lot of coconuts, a lot of bananas, potatoes. One of my mainstays is potatoes and other root vegetables, daikon. Um, these days I do some juicing every morning where I'll juice a beet, I'll juice a potato, and then one other, typically a crucifer, like rutabagas or turnip. And then I'll take the juice and I'll take the pulp, and into the pulp I'll mix some other things too. And then it's such a wonderful breakfast. Mostly because it's good for the gut. The long chain carbohydrates, they're very long chain, and they're good prebiotics. They're fuel for the probiotics that you want. The crucifers have some phytochemicals that are really good against cancer. So any kind of precancers that are starting, really good to be having a diet that helps your body support itself. But again, everyone's experience is different. But I love my diet. I'm really happy with it.
That's awesome. But let's just be transparent. And you shared with me, and actually you shared with all of us earlier in this interview, that you actually put on a good amount of weight when you were on this island in the Pacific, where one of your staples happened to be coconuts. And we know that coconuts are very high in saturated fat. So, and not being critical, but you didn't have access to lots of other fruits and vegetables. And we know, and not just from you, there are other studies where people, when most or a good chunk of their calories is coming from coconuts, the saturated fat can actually cause weight gain. So is that correct?
That's not only is that correct, but my body rebelled. At some point, I started getting really itchy. And it took a while to figure out that was correlated with some blooming of coconut trees. And before then, I had been having maybe as many as 3 young coconuts in a day, and maybe 4 even. And after that, I just I cut it out, so at most 1 coconut, and the itching went away. It was an allergic reaction. Your body's really smart. Like, and I mean, for me, I think part of my physiology, it's just difficult to lose weight. I like to focus on exercise so that I'm less hungry. If I exercise a whole lot, then my mood is better, and so I'll eat less. But sometimes I overeat. Maybe I'm having like way too many raisins, and someone may say, "Hey, Daniel, that's your bad thing is you're eating too many raisins." But too much dried fruit or too much fatty stuff, too many walnuts, and yeah, whatever. I think over the past several months, I think I've lost about 10 pounds, but I'm one of those people who hasn't had an easy success with losing weight, even though I have a raw vegan diet. Go figure.
Yeah. Have you ever tried fasting?
I have done, not recently, and I haven't been very consistent with it. When I've done the intermittent fasting, I've been so busy in my life that it didn't really fit my lifestyle too easily. And I think that's the thing with fasting. You really have to make time for it. You can't it'd be wonderful to do a 3-day water fast or a 30-day water fast. Oh my goodness. But, that's the kind of thing that you have to make time for. And hopefully I'll do something good. But fasting's wonderful. It gives you a sense of peace and calm, which is really important for someone dealing with dementia, to have their own ability to say, "Hey, if I do this, I will feel good."
Yeah. So actually I want to go back to, when you were 20 in University of Cambridge. I remember you were the life of the party. I mean, I understood you took drugs, but you were extremely popular back then, which is awesome. But in listening to the story, it's great to hear that you also now, fortunately, again, have an amazing social life. Correct?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Although this past year I've been struggling with depression a bit.
Really? Okay.
And I think, it's sort of the nature of sometimes creative people, creative professions. I didn't have an easy time when my last job ended. Some people in the department were not as supportive, and I put so much effort in. So it's been a
but actually, to be fair, and when I visited you when you were a professor there, you had students not only in your own classes, you had students from who just, you were an amazing role model. You won an award for spirit and cheerleading. So I understand that there may have been some politics behind the scenes, but in terms of socialization and you were the old Daniel I remember from Cambridge, completely fitting in. So it's cool that part is there. And again, another thing that triggered me to talk about is, you shared with us using drugs and alcohol when you were 20. I would say, in my experience, that's often a way for someone to treat a low dopamine level. And I would just put out there that you share with us that you've been having some depression. That could also, again, be a low dopamine level that you're experiencing.
Absolutely. And it may also be, I have pretty low vitamin D levels, pretty low B12 levels. And typically I may supplement with B12 every once in a while, but I hardly ever supplement with D because I have a negative mood reaction typically. On the other hand, I thought, well, maybe it's worth a try. So just today, I took 2,000 international units of D3. So hopefully,
which actually is not much.
It's not much, but I need the lower amount. And whatever politics you mentioned, I like not to think about it as politics. I like more to think about it as my own biological makeup. Maybe I wasn't getting enough exercise while I was doing the academic stuff. And so let me build up my health again and be in good shape.
Right, because exercise is another way to boost your dopamine. No
absolutely, absolutely. I was at a market recently, also 99 Ranch Market here in Los Angeles, and we found big bag of ginseng for like $20. You get, I think, half a pound of ginseng fresh. So yeah, no, like 15 roots of ginseng, huge amount. So I thought, hey, let me try this for my breakfast stuff too. So I've been juicing a little bit of ginseng every few days too, and I think that's been helpful. Yeah, no, it's diet. Focus on a raw vegan diet gives you sort of a very good baseline from which you can make observations.
Beautiful. And in terms of your career as a PhD, you've published so much. Just to hone in on one of the many, well, first of all, you actually published multiple articles about your own experience that you shared with us here on schizophrenia and how to reverse it with a raw vegan diet. So, first of all, kudos to you. And if anyone actually wants to see what you're describing documented, it's in the literature, and people will be able to find links at the end. But I wanted to ask, you actually published a case report on COVID vaccine psychiatric effects. Can you just share how you ended up doing that article and what you found about the vaccine effect on the brain?
Dr. Josh, thank you for that question. It's a very good question. I had a friend. Yeah, no, I had a friend, and she told me this story, and I thought I'd better write that up so that other people can find out. Basically, what happened, she had been on St. John's wort and had a terrible, like a psychotic episode from the administration of the vaccine. And it turns out that the spike protein that the mRNA vaccines are creating interacts with one of the biochemical constituents of St. John's wort. And St. John's wort itself is being studied as perhaps some kind of utility for treating COVID or for something related to that. But in her case, her body had a reaction to the spike protein, and at the same time ended up with a reaction to the St. John's wort. And now she can't take the St. John's wort. She figured it out herself. She's the St. John's wort. Her symptoms cleared up, and she's like, okay, I'm not doing that again. But this is something that she had been taking for say 5 years. And, when she told me that story, I said, hey, let me write this up so that other people can find out and other practitioners may be aware. And that it's almost like a key in a lock. The spike protein fits very nicely with one of the biochemicals in St. John's wort. So just be aware if you have a reaction like that, you're not the only one.
And I'll refer, there's an earlier episode on my podcast where we talk all about the spike protein and the effects on the brain. So it's cool that you've actually published about this topic. With your permission, I just want to give you a bunch of rapid fire questions. Is that okay?
Absolutely. But let me ask first, do you want me to answer at the end of all of them or rapid response? How do you want to do it?
No, rapid response. This isn't a memory test.
Okay.
Okay. So is schizophrenia a modern disease? Is it sometimes misdiagnosed as autism?
Yes.
Could it be caused by antipsychotics in some cases?
Yes.
Are we drugging away spiritual crises?
Sometimes.
Do parasites play a bigger role than we think?
It depends what you think, but they certainly can play a major role.
Awesome. And can schizophrenia ever be a form of genius misfiring?
Okay, that's a tough one to answer. Let me say very quickly, genius is just a way of saying creative. Someone who's a genius is creative in the adult world and not in the child's world, where you expect children to be creative. But schizophrenia is a real illness. It's not just creativity. The DSM manual has the criteria. Certainly the disorganization and some of these other things are more akin to a intoxication. It's as if a person is intoxicated, but they haven't taken anything in. It's the body's own endogenous biochemistry that's creating the intoxication. And I think it's safe to say that other dementias may be like that as well, where it's as if the person is intoxicated, but it's the body itself creating that intoxication. So I don't think it's necessarily just creativity gone wrong.
Makes sense. All right. So in 10 years, what will we be embarrassed we believed about schizophrenia?
It will be embarrassed to believe that we don't have to have a long-term plan. We have to have a long-term plan for recovery. If someone's treating schizophrenia, please think in terms of short-term and long-term.
Beautiful. Could schizophrenia be a microbiome problem at its core?
Absolutely. Remember that major mental illness is unique. In each person who has it, their pathway may be someone may be strictly related to microbiome. Other people may be related to other kinds of things.
And if you only had 3 months to reverse schizophrenia in someone, what's your very first move?
Very first move is to cut out anything that affects the brain negatively, things like drugs, alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, caffeine, chocolate. Get the diet healthy, get exercise going, get with other people who are trying to recover, do some kind of practice for yourself that's going to be healthy.
Awesome. Is there any question I should have asked you but neglected to?
No, but I will take this time to share some compassion. Dementia is such a horrible, horrible condition. If you or a loved one are suffering from dementia, you have my sympathy. The people around you also. Many people don't understand it. They don't understand that it might be reversible if you do the right things. There's no guarantee. But again, if you're suffering, I'm so sorry. Keep at it. Keep trying. Don't give up hope, and do the things, even little things that you think are going to be useful.
Wow. I echo that. That's a wonderful sentiment. If someone wants to find you, where are you on social media? Where can people find you?
So just typing in Daniel Helman, Ph.D. should be enough to find into a search engine to find me personally. But I'm also on X, Twitter. My name, instead of Daniel Helman, my handle is Helman Daniel. And in fact, I have a website that I just put up called Help with Schizophrenia that has a lot of the information there. And you can find that on my X feed. It's pretty obvious up there. Or they could get in touch with you, Dr. Josh, and say, "Hey, we want to talk to your brother," and you'll give them my information.
That's true. I definitely will refer people to you. But this is exciting. So it sounds like among your other academic pursuits, you're actually willing to help other people in their schizophrenia journey if they want your help. Is that for coaching? Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. I'd be happy if someone wants someone to talk to, whether you're the person suffering or family member. I'm happy to share my experience, and I'm happy to do a little bit of coaching, like life coaching, as far as what to expect, and to be a person to be a sounding board if someone has some ideas for what they're struggling with. And again, I have this website, Help with Schizophrenia, that you could find, and my contacts there, and happy to help other people suffering from this disease. Again, everyone's experience is different. There's no guarantee. It's really just a question of getting into a frame of mind for progress and not losing hope.
Wow, that's beautiful. And as I was doing this interview, I just reflect that both of us ended up with a vegan diet. I mean, I'm not 100% raw. I would say high raw, probably 90% raw. But I came to this journey independently of you. I mean, we were both brought up on a standard American diet with lots of processed foods and lots of animal products. And my reason for changing was I was overweight by 50 pounds and had high blood pressure, and I couldn't fix my own issues without dramatically changing my diet and cutting out the animal products and the processed foods. And it's amazing to me that you came basically to the same conclusion independently, but it's beautiful that we both came to a solution. And the whole point of this podcast is that there's hope if you have dementia, hope if you have schizophrenia, hope if you have a family member or a friend with these conditions. So I really want to thank you, brother, for being willing to be part of this and to spread the good news. So,
Josh, I'm so proud of you. Keep up the great work. No, seriously. And mom and dad are so happy. I know mom talks about how, I can't believe it, our sons get along.
What, one more time, our son is what?
Our sons get along. In other words, like we're both doing raw vegan stuff and have similar interests in. Yeah,
that's true. When we were young, little boys, we did not get along with each other sometimes. So
you suffered so much as a young child. You had such a hard experience.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's amazing to see how happy you are, and how much diet has played a role in creating a healthy and happy lifestyle for yourself.
So with that, I'm going to say peace and plants, and thanks again.
I love you. Thanks again, Josh.
You too. Bye for now.